Sio, halito, kama wengapo, chamachukma, sego. What's happening? What's up, beautiful ones? 1 2 1 2. Drop a 1 in the chat if y'all can hear me. Put your hands up. Put the ones in the chat if my mic is okay. 1 2 1 2. Now drop a okay. What's happening, everybody? Good Sunday to you. Peace and love to you all. Hope everything is healthy. We got a good show tonight. We got cousin Ishmael, brother Jmar will be pulling up. Recap, give a little bit of urban Indian country news. Let's just do that. And let's also celebrate the wins, celebrate the truth coming out. We had a wonderful time on CHIEF Warhorse's live. A wonderful time with her and Mr. Walter. I really enjoyed myself. That was fun. So proud of her. So happy for her. That was great. Look forward to more. Her channel is going to be so lit. So lit. So yeah, you see that we were reading the Dancing Rabbit Creek Treaty, and went to the Choctaw Nation. Good thing that we actually was, doing the screen share, and we see that they did not include Article 10 through 19. It went straight from Article 9 straight to 20. And I really had to go through wait a minute, I know my Roman numerals, you know what I'm saying, and how they go. So it was kind of interesting that happened. The next day, it was so crazy, as irony would have it, these suckers put it back, right? Crazy. They put it back. Now, had the same tabs open that I had the night before, and here it is. The Choctaw Nation has now added all of the articles back. It was absolutely hilarious, and we just followed that, and we got it on. We got that moment. So yeah, there's no trickery involved or anything. They just like that. They added it back. And we noticed, we got the receipts. I thought that was amazing. Catch them off guard, couldn't slipping. You know what I'm saying? It's funny because people be trying to fight us, and we trying to fight the powers that be dead ass wrong, dead ass stealing, dead ass cheating, right? And that's what it is. So a lot of encounters that we've been having for people that, aren't really honest in what it is that they're doing. They're not really forthcoming about, the nation build for real. So we want to just make sure that we keep it with the information. And let's be clear, there is so many caveats in the videos. And I do not want to minimize all of the other great content, but Tom and CHIEF Warhorse, Tom Ackland, in that video, we can do a series. There's so much content in it, and that's what is inspiring us to do this series with these episodes of how the colonizer went to chief, and then how white people have now made themselves a minority in order to, be greedy and do what it is that they're doing. And it's absolutely painful to see so many people jumping on a bandwagon against doing what's right for the American Indians. But contrary to that, we are still here. We are here. They didn't kill us off with any smallpox. I know we ain't never find no death certificates that say anything about smallpox. What's up, cousin Ish? How are you?
I'm doing fine, cousin. How you doing, Phoenix? How you doing, everybody?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm glad you're here.
For
Um,
sure.
I was just recapping, how there's a lot of resistance towards what's right. Um, and it's really no place for that. No one should be on the side of wrong, right? Everybody's got some grievances and things that they want to have redress of those grievances. And it's on the table for anybody that's aware of what those grievances actually are that are lawful and legal, right? And we have things to stand on. The truth doesn't need any legs to walk or needs to crawl, it stands on its own. And with that being said, if everybody's telling the truth, then nobody has anything to worry about. So, with that being said, all of the aggressive people, the influx of trolls and things like that, we see you and we know you listening. And that's okay. And we're schooling people at the same time. So at some point, everybody's going to get the straightening that they need so that, it's aware of what it is that, we're coming with. And the truth, again, it doesn't really need any explanation. We're just going to convey it and put it out there and people can see for themselves. Right.
Agreed.
Hey, Jmar, how are you? What's happening?
Hey, peace, Phoenix, peace, Ish. What's going on?
Peace to you, brother Jmar. Good to see you, brother.
Everything is well. I just wanted to catch people up to speed, as I will. What's going on? I did a little bit of urban Indian country news. I wanted to start there. Cousin Ish, what you got? What's new for the week on First Tribe?
First Tribe. We just got a fresh one, kind of tying into what we're dealing with tonight. The newest post is dealing with the names and companies of the most brutal Indian slave traders after 1808, along with slave testimonies. So again, we're dealing with the names and the companies of the most brutal Indian slave traders after the year of 1808, along with the direct slave testimonies. And this is from the Library of Congress. So these are the official records coming from the slaves. So, it's going to be tying into what we're dealing with tonight, but that's the newest post on firsttribenation.com. And if I'll give you, it's a bit of a sample on the front part of the post. It's like about 15 or 20 names of the slaves. But if you go into the forum, it's over 250 names. And it's really just because I just ran out of room to keep posting the names up. But we're talking about these are the slaves that are saying, my families are Indians, my families are Choctaw, my mother was Lumbee, my mother was. This is direct slave testimony of them telling you where they're coming from. So that's what we're dealing with tonight, cousin.
So cousin Ish always comes with the receipts, y'all. So y'all make sure y'all give him credit. Don't let me see his stuff floating around and you don't shout out First Tribe, okay? And Ishmael Bey. All right, he's always got the drop. It's an excellent website, really clean. It is a treasure trove of receipts, information that you ain't gonna find nowhere else. Please go check it out. Matter of fact, drop it in the back chat, and I'll run it as a banner while we getting into it. If you want, you can even go through some of those names right now, give the people something to look forward to throughout the week while they got Monday coming up, right? You're going back to business and your breaks and your downtime. Check out this First Tribe, refresh yourselves and all of that. Drink some water. You know what I'm saying? Good medicine. Get to it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be spending the month of March. I'll be in Houston, Texas. So if y'all in the Texas area, I'm going to be working out a couple of trips. We're going to take a trip to the American Indian Genocide Museum that's in Houston, Texas. So we're going to be very productive while we're there. I'll be there for the whole month, taking care of other business, but it's family business first. So we're going to make sure we work out some trips to go there. And we have another little location that's going to be real nice in Houston, Texas. So make sure y'all check me out. I did post it up on the back chat, cousin. And on there, again, with the names and the companies, it reads, there's never the proven documentation presented comprehensively regarding the Indian slave traders, so the myth is perpetrated of Africans replacing Indians as the main slave source. Well, those days are over. And we first start off with what Brother Jmar and with yourself and have been highlighting, which is that Isaac and Franklin and John Armfield. Those were Indian slaves that were being traded. So we deal with Isaac Franklin and John Armfield were two American slave traders who operated in the early 19th century. It gives you the whole background of their particular company. But then as you further go down there, you start dealing with more companies that enslaved Native Americans in the intra-American slave trade. We got to put the names of who was doing this trading, because you can't just sit there and say, oh, I heard this or I heard that. No, these were actual companies that were taking place on it. So what are the name of these companies? The Indian slave trade, also known as the intra-American slave trade, was widespread, a lucrative industry in the United States during the 19th century. While Isaac Franklin and John Armfield were two of the most notorious slave traders involved in the trade, there were several other companies that profited from the exploitation of Native American populations. Here are just a few. R.B. Lindsay and Company. They were based in New Orleans. This company was one of the largest slave trading firms in the South during the 1830s and 1840s. They were involved in the Indian slave trade and often purchased Native American slaves from Franklin and Armfield for resale in Louisiana and other states. You have Lathrop and Roundtree. This company was based in St. Louis, Missouri, involved in both African and Indian slaves. They purchased large numbers of enslaved Indians from tribes in the Plains region and sold them to buyers in the South and the Southwest. They were purchasing Midwest slaves and moving them to the South. Again, that's Lathrop and Roundtree. Then you have the Chickasaw Trading Company. That's right. This company was based in Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, and was involved in the sale of enslaved American Indians from the Chickasaw and Choctaw tribes. They sold enslaved people to buyers in the South and Southwest, as well as to other tribes in the Indian Territory. So if you notice, they were pulling American Indians from the Midwest, moving them to the South, and taking people from the South and moving them to the Midwest from the Chickasaw Trading Company. Then you have Trader Horn. This is one of the trading names used by a man named Alfred Hennon. This is naming the names, goddammit. Alfred Hennon, who operated out of Santa Fe Trail. In the mid-19th century, Hennon was involved in the Indian slave trade, purchased enslaved Native Americans from tribes in the Southwest for resale in the South and the West. Then you have the Choctaw Academy. This was a school for Native American boys, established the Choctaw Nation in Mississippi in the 19th century. The school was run by a man named Cyrus Kingsbury, who also operated a plantation and was involved in the Indian slave trade. Kingsbury purchased enslaved Native Americans from the Choctaw and other tribes for the use on his plantation, and also sold enslaved people to buyers in other parts of the country. Going further down, I give you even more names. James H. Birch and Company out of New Orleans. You got Phoenix and Talbot. This company was based in Mobile, Alabama. This was a notorious company. Don't forget them, Phoenix and Talbot. Then it was involved in the slave trade during the 1830s and 40s. They were one of the largest dealers of enslaved Native Americans, purchasing them from the tribes in the Southeast and selling them to buyers in the Southwest and other parts of the country. You got James Converse and Company. You have Ewing and Hannibal and Company. You have Hornsby and Campbell and Company. And then we have the direct slave narratives, again, from the Library of Congress. This is the groups that were being interviewed here were specifically from North Carolina. Just in North Carolina alone, I'm giving you the specific names of the slaves and their testimony that's dealing in North Carolina. Just as a sample, we have those interview with Sally High. She describes her family background as half Indian and half Negro. Mind you, they was telling us, and they tell us in these universities, these high schools, and all these other educational realms that the slave trade wasn't happening with Indians like that. Let's not forget that. They tell us that they stopped doing that. But how are all of these companies making millions and millions and millions of dollars? And again, everything that I'm posting on here was after 1808. I thought that you stopped in 1619. Isn't that what's being promoted? No.
Hold Hold on. That's a whole bunch of heat. I hope y'all got y'all pens and papers, but I'm gonna need y'all to stop what y'all doing right now. Like the video, share the video out. You might need to sit down and drink a little bit of water. That was a lot of heat in rapid succession. Okay. Now this is probably gonna be the most jewels you get all week long. Get your week started right. Cousin Ish, I'm gonna let you go, but I need them to like and share the video because that was just
absolutely like and share, Put everybody on notice. So we naming the names, we naming the companies, we naming the people of the companies. Let's go. We can't. The history is written in the blood. The history is written in the sweat and the tears of our ancestors. We got to name the names.
And it's not to be taken lightly at all. And this is why we go so hard. It's super important. It's super important. What's up, Brother Jmar? What's happening with you?
Not much. Just trying to dig a little deeper, trying to bring the people a little bit more information on this deep dive.
Yes, indeed. Cousin Ish, can I post that in the chat for the people?
For sure. Yep, it's posted on the back chat. You can post it up for sure.
Listen, please, you do yourself a favor. Y'all gonna want to share that anyway. Y'all gonna want to share it anyway because it's dropped. It's dropped. There you go. Y'all got that pen and paper? Y'all get to it. That's just a snippet. That's just a snippet. All of those companies now, there is no reason for people not to dig into their family history because now everything is kind of laid out for you guys. At this point, folks just being lazy. It's no way you've been doing your genealogy. You've been listening to all of these people all of these years talking this indigenous stuff, and you ain't got your eyes on something. You still don't know what tribe you are. You're in the wrong loop. You in the wrong loop. You in the wrong loop. Don't go too far. Don't go too far. You know they carry you on a magic carpet ride on the regular. They try to take you off the land all the time. Keep your mind on the family and what's important. Get to the bottom of what's happening here. We making it easy. Brother Jmar, what you got? What you got on it? Isaac Franklin and Livingston family.
I guess this live the information that I wanted to bring out has to do with a lot with Angola and the development of those plantations, particularly through the passage of time, starting a little bit before Isaac and leading up into the state penitentiary. Through this, I will also be bringing out some facts about the state penitentiary, some of its history. I will also be hitting on also some of these companies, steady running into these companies, these firms being established off of this specific trafficking, labor, plantation work, development. So after that, I think I'll be touching into something that I ran into that was quite interesting through what was called the Negro Dependent, the Child in Louisiana, which entitles the history from the 1800s to about 1935. This touching on some of the enslavement of the women and children in the Louisiana State Penitentiary. So I think that's something definitely vital that needs to be brought up. So right now, I would actually like to share this Angola PDF.
Yes, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So this is actually coming from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers of New Orleans District, the Angola Plantation to Penitentiary. Going down, I highlighted some key points in this PDF, and I believe I'll be going back and forth through this just to highlight some stuff. So starting off, the history of Angola, particularly in the antebellum period, Francis Rolfe of West Feliciana Parish began acquiring the lands currently constituting Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola in 1827, and by 1834, some 75% of the property. He divided his holdings into 3 adjacent cotton plantations called Bellevue, Kilnary, and La Chalomande. In 1835, Francis Rolfe formed a partnership with Isaac Franklin. So this is the beginning partnership to establish Franklin to where he is currently, right? So it actually started with Francis Rolfe, then a partnership with Isaac Franklin. So continuing, he and Isaac Franklin was a wealthy Tennessee planter who made enormous fortune in the interstate slave trade, as we highlighted in past lives. Until the middle 1830s, Franklin and his slaver associates were considered the leading long-distance slave traffickers in the country and credited with supplying some 2/3 of all slaves transported to the Deep South. So these guys were basically more than half of the slaves they were supplying through their partnership, basically. And continuing, when Rolfe's finances collapsed in 1837, all of his property then passed to Franklin, right? So this is how Franklin gets to acquire these lands. It's off of the partnership, and then eventually Rolfe falls into some financial problems, and it eventually gets passed on to Franklin. And then Franklin's married to Adelicia Hayes. She was a prominent debutante from Nashville, Tennessee. On July 1st, 1839, Franklin was 50 years old and Adelicia was 22 years old. The couple lived part of the year in Tennessee and part in Louisiana and went back and forth quite frequently. In the 1840s, Franklin added a 4th plantation to his property, known variously as Woodward, Angora, or Angola. So this property in 1840 was eventually what is going to be known as or highlighted under the name Angola for the state prison. Angola Big House would serve the family's main Louisiana residents. The Lango Plantation was created from the southernmost portion of Angola's tract, and the Panola Plantation from the northeasternmost part of the Bellevue prior to 1846. And as you can see here, here's a little map of layout so you can get a little understanding of the layout of these plantations and how they added these plantations over time. The 7 antebellum plantations that make up the Angola property, now the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. This is a picture of Isaac Franklin. Isaac Franklin himself died in Angola on April 27th, 1846, and his over 8,000 acres in West Feliciana was valued at almost $500,000. Weirdly enough, the story behind his death, check this out, his body was preserved in 2 barrels of whiskey, then was transported in a sheet-lead coffin via steamboat to Nashville, where eventually they had the funeral. But I thought that was quite odd. I never heard of them preserving bodies in barrels of whiskey. But continuing, upon her inheritance after Isaac Franklin's passing in 1846, Adelicia Hayes Franklin was considered now the wealthiest woman in late antebellum America. And on May 8th, 1849, she married Joseph Alexander Smith Acklin. Tom Acklin. So here's the connection to where Tom comes in to this whole relationship to these lands in Louisiana. Through Joseph Alexander Smith Ackland, a prominent Huntsville, Alabama lawyer. Before marriage, Ackland signed a prenuptial agreement relinquishing all interest in Adelicia's business and property and assets, which was not the first time she had done this, because in her next marriage, she had done the same thing with the prenuptial. So this lady was quite savvy and protecting her empire and her wealth. Nevertheless, Ackland was a superb businessman and plantation manager who tripled his wife's fortune by 1860. So here we go. Wealth stacking up, land stacking up, property, plantation.
Prenups and all that. She had prenups.
Yes. Just laying the little foundation of this property, this because it's such crazy history. So continuing. So this is Joseph Alexander Smith Ackland. Quick picture of him so you can get a little, look at him. Now, Ackland spent most of the winter at the Angola plantation and the remainder year in Nashville, right? So as we was talking, they were going back and forth from Tennessee to Louisiana. And they did this on these points in the river by steamers, by steamboats, basically. Joseph Ackland himself purchased several additions to Louisiana properties between 1852 and 1857 to augment his wife plantations. A new 640-acre tract became Monrovia Plantation. By 1860, Ackland claimed to possess $2 million in real estate and $1 million in personal estate. The previous year, the Ackland's Louisiana plantation had produced 3,149 bales of cotton, making them the third largest cotton producer in the state of Louisiana. They had some 659 slaves that worked 4,000 acres of improved land. Some 128 slaves lined in 44 cabins on the Angola plantation. And leading up to the Civil War, we will see how there's a little odd stories that revolve around the Civil War and the allegiances taking place through Mr. Joseph Ackland. So during the Civil War, Joseph Ackland signed an oath of allegiance to the Confederacy. He donated some $30,000 to the Confederate war effort. Crippled with rheumatism, Ackland could not enlist. And when the Union advanced into the Middle Tennessee in 1862, Adelicia encouraged him to escape that very same Angola plantation. In Louisiana, Ackland was in a difficult position. The Federals that have occupied New Orleans and Baton Rouge threatened him from the river, while the Confederates from the land. His property was provided the main river crossing for the Confederates' provisions for the war, mail, and troops in the area. In April 1862, the U.S. Navy steamship Brooklyn docked at Angola, and there's quite a little story of how the lieutenant asked him for provisions. Leading to that, basically, he was left in a difficult position. One of his last letters he wrote from Angola in August 20th, 1863, that all was in ruins. The field was wasting, and the Confederates had taken all of his mules and horses, that he had been subjected to all kinds of lies, slander that malice could invent. And in September 1863, Ackland was purportedly thrown from a wagon into a ditch on his Louisiana plantation, subsequently caught pneumonia and died, which I would say is quite odd death conditions. It sounds like someone put him in the ditch. I'll just say that real quick. The very month of Joseph's death, Adelicia, his surviving widower, submitted a claim with the Confederate Army for $31,340 worth of cotton, horses, and mules, those very same things that Joseph had wrote to her in one of his last letters. She hurried to the Louisiana plantation, and in early 1864 to prevent the burning of her cotton by either army. She had the rebel soldiers, which under quite odd auspices, without orders from his higher ups, agreed to guard her over 2,800 bales of cotton. And Alicia convinced the federal Rear Admiral David D. Porter to provide the teams and wagons needed to load the cotton on a boat and get it to New Orleans. Both sides, meaning the Union and the Confederates, were led to believe that the cotton sale for well over $1 million would benefit their cause. Quite odd, playing both sides and making a lot of money. That's all I gotta say. Eventually, she remarries to a William Archer chieftain. Continues to also build some of her wealth. She eventually, splits with this guy and falls ill. And eventually she does pass. But before she passes, right, this property was sold to the next owner of this egregious business. Continuing, it's a picture of some of the plantation. I'll give you a picture. So on December 23rd, 1880, Alicia and William Cheatham sold their West Feliciana properties to the partnership of Louise Trager and Samuel L. James. The property totaled 10,015 acres, exclusive of Batteroon grounds, and was sold to Trager and James for $100,000. Samuel L. James. Interesting. Samuel L. James was a civil engineer who in 1869 formed the firm of James Bruckner and Company. So here's another company. Levy contractors, which receive a 5-year lease from the state to manage the prison system in Louisiana. This lease gave the company authority to manage the main prison in Baton Rouge, known as The Walls, as well as to lease out convicts to work on private plantations and public work projects. In 1870, that lease was extended 5 years. That lease was extended from 5 years to a 21-year lease, during which time James reportedly maintained the most brutal, cynical, profit-oriented prison regime in Louisiana's history. Approximately 3,000 prisoners died under James's lease between 1870 and 1901. So in a 31-year period, averaging about 1,000 prisoners in a decade, 1,000 prisoners each decade was dying under this lease provided to him by the state of Louisiana, might I point out. And this picture right here is of the gentleman, Samuel James. Well, might I not say gentleman, the brutal guy, Samuel James, and his family behind the Angola Big House in 1892, right? So here we go. We had the Isaac and Frankel, right, which was started by Isaac Franklin and John Armfield, which eventually their business out of Alexandria, Virginia, is then turned into the Price and Birch Company, right? See how those companies change hands, still maintaining the same system, just under a new hand. Now, here we go. After Isaac stops his enterprise with the slave trading business, he goes into the plantation field business now, down acquiring all these lands as I went through. And after he passes his land on to his wife sells it then to Samuel L. James, which then starts the next company, right? Which is the James Bruckner and Company, right? But I would also like to add out that there was even a company before James Bruckner and Company by the name of Manhattan Pratt and Ward and Company that was also giving a lease by the state of Louisiana to do this brutal convict leasing system, which is what we know today as our mass incarceration. And as we can see, the same type of things are happening today on Angola plantation or the Angola penitentiary. I also would like to mention that the Ackland story does not end with Adelicia selling that property. As you can see right here, the business partnership with Tradger and James was dissolved in 1882. Through that, William and Claude Ackland still held on to Panola, Lacomend, and Monrovia plantation, in which they didn't actually sell those properties to the state of Louisiana until 1922. So the Ackland story does not end with Adelicia selling her properties or whatever properties they had there, because still some of the Ackland brothers, William and Claude Ackland, sold their property to the state as little as far back as 1922, which is just over 100 years ago. Of course, I have more to add to that, but I would think I'll leave it right there.
I got one of the census records where, of course, they had to be stashing money because by the time she was with Tom, they really just listed his assets as head of household. It was quite interesting, too. Hold on. One second.
Definitely want to thank everybody for tuning in also. Thank you.
Yes, I'll just do it from here and just share my screen from my G Drive. Let's see. Oh, here it is. So, they had a lot of money for back then, but what was crazy is they definitely didn't they wasn't counting her chicken. They was certainly counting his. And here we are. Okay, can you see that?
So something loading up. Yep, I see it.
Yep. It's on.
Okay, so this is, let me see. This is the 18. Yeah, let me make it bigger. This is 18 Davison, Tennessee, free inhabitants of the city of Nashville and the county of Davison, Tennessee, enumerated September 1850. So you have them here, the Acklands. Let's see. Put my glasses on. Hold on. So you have, they got the most money on here. Where they at? Make sure I have the right one. Here they go. They're on line 5. So you have Adelina. They have her listed as Ada here. She was 30 years old, and they have him having being a lawyer as his title, and he has $20,000. They have him born here in Alabama, and her, of course, in Tennessee. So you can see the other neighbors and stuff like that, and this always makes sense to see what kind of merchants they were and who they were surrounded by. you see these same names in antiquity, and you know that they got a lot to do with what was going on here. So I just wanted to show that they had very meager, for the amount of money that they had amassed by 1850. Certainly, they had very meager means that they were reporting. So you know, again, there was some things that they were hiding, um, especially being connected to everybody. She's also related to Robert Livingston and Rutherford B. Hayes. She had quite a bit of pull. So they were playing both sides, and they are a clear example of how both the Confederacy and the Union worked against the Indians. Also, going forward, I think we need to, during this series, y'all, if we can spend on the Civil War portion of what happened at the people in Natchez, right? Because that doesn't really get told. People are familiar with it as the Devil's Punch Bowl, but there is a punch line to that, and it needs to be told so that there can be truth and accuracy in regards to that. And people should pay some respects to see if any of their family members, collateral lines, or grandparents that may have perished in that detail, right? In that specific campaign. That's something historically, a caveat you definitely want to make sure if you have any relatives that you're aware of. The same thing with the incident in Tulsa. If you are related to these people, there are tangible things that they have to do to make you whole, right? And you should be made whole, and you should get used to winning, and you should get used to fighting a good fight. I just totally wanted to add that. So these on-field, I do have the document of Isaac dying on. It's not really important, much to look at. I can certainly drop the PDF in the chat if you want it, where Isaac dies at Angola. Nothing really spectacular there. She got married several other times. How many other times did this lady get married? She had about 3 other husbands.
Yeah, I would say like 3 or 4 husbands. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they all had to sign prenups after her and Isaac. That's how much money she acquired being a widow. And I'm sure they used that damsel in distress to the best of their ability to control the South, essentially. And then they kind of dumbed them down and undermined only because she's a woman. But this lady, she had a lot going for herself back then, good, bad, or indifferent. That's for sure. And then she had company as well. There's a story that we talked about with she got one of her homegirls. I don't know if it was a cousin or something, and they went and retrieved that cotton from Angola. They got arrested by the Union soldiers, who happened to be General Polk. But she was also related to the Union president. Not only are they playing Confederate, but they have kinfolk on the other side. So either way, these folks were winning. And that's some other stuff that we're going to get into further in these episodes, how they just, kind of perpetrate the same game over and over and over again. And now they've just expanded, changed the names, went bankrupt under one company and completely have another. We talked about the Pinkertons briefly last week. And if you've seen, the Pinkertons are still in business, right? And I thought of them specifically because of the railroad situation, what happened with the tracks in Ohio. And I used to work for a transportation and logistics company that deals with Union Pacific exclusively. So it was, something to pay attention to. And then, of course, they plastered these same railroads through the Rockefeller and the steel industry, all through our lands. A lot of the fight wasn't just to enslave people, it was to make room for the railroad, and they had to remove folks. They had to remove them from their lands. So, these people It's interesting. So now we're going into where she's related to Robert Livingston, which is one of the signatories for the Louisiana Purchase. So that also ties them there. So they had business on top of business, and then they had business with people as they're doing nefarious things. Virginia, the Redbones, the North Carolina, the Piedmont area, lots of southeastern woodlands, even from New York, and I wouldn't even exclude parts of Vermont and New Hampshire and Rhode Island and other places in New England that they were kidnapping people. We know about Solomon Northup, but they had an elaborate thing going in all of these places, Georgia, and then even leading up to Polk. So going to James Polk, who ended up being he ended up being the 11th president, right? A lot of people in North Carolina, they married into the Sharon. They married into the Waxhaw. And that must have been the part of Andrew Jackson that he absolutely hated the most, because he was born on the Waxhaw plantation, where there were a bunch of Indians and then they just disappeared and somehow became enslaved and never heard of again. They say that they went extinct. Extinct is a word for enslaved, if you ask me. It says legally they just stopped practicing as a tribe. Well, then that also means that they lost their civic duty. So that was a result of them blacking people out and giving them the misnomers and misclassifications in the first place. It was definitely a major contributor to them being able to do so. And that's going to be a grievance that across the board, people have to agree with, that were misclassified, whether they're a misclassified American Indian or a misclassified European, whether they're Chinese Tom, who was a slave. He still has, his descendants still have a right to stand on that as well, especially when it comes down to reparations for being slaves, right? Whatever it is that people are dealing with, we can all agree that several things didn't happen. There was no separation of church and state, and a lot of these religious factions have absolutely spilled into these politics that we're talking about that end up in commercial activity, dealing with our ancestors and removing us from land and, essentially making commodities out of selling indigenous people, and then changing the narrative and calling them African all of a sudden, right? Within the last 40, 50 years. So now we find ourselves going back to correct things that were wrong when they came out. Roots was wrong when it came out in the 70s, right? It was plagiarized when it came out in the 70s. So the effect that it actually had on people was far more detrimental than him stealing drop from Harold Corlander.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Solomon Northup. His grandfather was a Mohawk. In fact, an elder of the Mohawk.
His great-grandmother and grandfather too. And
Absolutely.
I even tracked them down to the Falls River, Massachusetts, which is very close to Albany and Saratoga. You can actually get to Massachusetts in probably 45 minutes.
Yeah, part of his bloodline is Narragansett too.
Yes, they absolutely have those Mohegan and Mohawk bloodlines, and Stockbridge, and even Abenaki roots as well. Schaghticoke, all of those lineages, and definitely the Iroquois lineage. So they've done that to quite a few bit of people. He's just the one that was famous. He was able to write a book, and you can see, some things on him, tangibles. There's tax records that he has in the 1860s and stuff like that. But you know how much has changed when someone goes through something like that. You know what I'm saying? I wish that there were more sources or people that were able to interview him, because even giving his perspective, what was it like for someone that post-slavery, now they have time to do different things and they're able to read and they articulate being enslaved with Solomon Northup. You never get to hear any of those type of accounts. Like, that man would cry every night and we thought he was a liar and he kept saying he was free. He probably sounded crazy to the rest of those people that was all that they knew, right? So I just think of how that went, and just him trying to keep his cool when he was just in that position. But And people probably looked up to him because he was a skilled man. He was an articulate man, but he had to dumb down and not look any smarter than the people that were trying to control him. And again, we can tie these Epps family, and that's the person that held him the longest, back to North Carolina. And those are the people that enslaved the Sapani, the Occaneechi, okay, and the Indians of Bermuda Hundred as well. Jamestown, City Point.
What I noticed was when you study the slave narratives of the slaves explaining who they derived from themselves, it wasn't an isolated incident as far as Solomon Northup's and his story. What's emphasized or what we overlook is the fact that last week we were talking about the tainted source, that the main person that supplies the information to Emory University that he uses. Why did he have to rely on such a tainted source if it was such a common event? If this was something that was so common, why is the source that you're using as the majority of your book and the source of the information that you're providing, why are you using such a tainted source if it was so common? If everybody came from Africa, why is the Clotilda even found? There should be a whole bunch of slave ships that you can pull from, not just one little small community in one little area of Alabama. This should be something that's common. So why would it even stand out? It stands out because it's rare. It stands out because it's something that you don't see every day. And that's why they're able to isolate it, study it, and then multiply it and feed the lie to the public. So I just wanted to bring that to the people's attention of that's why that professor is using that tainted source. Cousin Felix, are you on mute?
Yes, and I was just running my mouth, But yeah, so and again, we're gonna get into some of the Rothschilds, and again, Bob Livingston. Bob Livingston also created Livingston Manor in New York. Okay, and these were the introduction of the Palatines. And if you guys are familiar with Palatines, you think you can give a description of what you think a Palatine is or who a Palatine is? Cousin Ish or brother Ish, Jmar? And I'm going to read a little bit from Adelicia's genealogy with respect to the Franklins. And that crew, because it also goes back to Benjamin Franklin, right? And the Benjamin Franklin, wasn't he a Frank, swarthy European, right? He was considered a swarthy European. So you already know where he comes from. German, France. A lot of them primarily came in through Pennsylvania. Most of the Germans and Palatines, they went through New York, and they came in specifically in the 1750s through Pennsylvania. So he created Livingston Manor, which is also a part of the Hudson Bay Company. So and that company had a lot to do with slave trade, as well as the deerskin, the fur trade, and all sorts of things. I also think that the Hudson Bay became like a money laundering, you know what I'm saying? Because it looked like they were doing honest trade with Indians, but somehow all of these people were getting erased in the interim. You had some families that remained successful, but then even up north, you had more of them that were becoming enslaved, the same as the ones down south as well. So I don't think people want to get away from thinking that people up north or the New England people didn't have slavery the same as the South did, because they both had these experiences. It's just that in the northern states that they abolished slavery a couple of decades earlier, not that it didn't happen at all. So I think that needs to be made clear. And they also gave free people of color, Indians, a hard time. The people of Seneca Village, all different types of situations where there's landowners to this day that own Manhattan for real, own portions and pieces of Brooklyn for real. And they have No idea that they do. The people of Seneca Village were relocated. You can see them on the 18 Albos and Marie Lyons. You can see them on the 1860 census in Providence, Rhode Island. They're with the Narragansett. And then they come back and then they own a lot of stuff in Brooklyn. They got their own hair products, barbershops, beauty parlors. Their occupation in 1860, they were still free people when they went to Rhode Island amongst the Narragansett. So quite interesting things, but that nonetheless, people still have those bloodline lineages that lead back to these fascinating places that we hear about in history, but nobody's really active on. That's still criminal activity. Okay, you know about Seneca Village. How do you attach yourself to Seneca Village? Right? For Angola, that is a real thing for people. A lot of people still to this day have family members that have experience with Angola, whether now or back in antiquity. But what is going to be done about it? And that's why we're exposing some of these nuances. For one, they're pertinent to our history that need to be told, so that people can, there's no real second guessing. But then how you're able to attach your own specific individual timeline with these events that occurred and how they may have affected your family members too. And I hope that's what people are using this information for, because that's what it is. It's about liberation and it's about truth.
No, that's a very good point. I would like to highlight just how relevant it is when we deal with the lineage and the things, that are being addressed. The information that we're sharing, of course, is lineage rooted. That's what the source of it is. The way that we are, the mantra of the way that we're carrying ourselves and what we represent. So I would like to share a story that came up this week on the 24th, just the other day. And it just got updated again today, the 26th. So this is dealing with a Texas family, because again, this is going all over, but they're finding their lineage and things are being addressed. So I'd like to share that if I may. What we have here. The name of the article is Descendants of Texas Slave Owner Enslaved Woman Seek to Claim Land Supposedly Left to Her 150 years ago. The importance of lineage, right? Some far-flung cousins, Texas roots, were astounded by a genealogy search, and they're finding out they may be entitled to land apparently left to an enslaved ancestor. It's the land they say their ancestors never actually got. This person says, quote, I took an ancestry DNA and I discovered what happened, and it was just unbelievable, said Candace Hammonds. Hammonds claims to be the great-great-great-granddaughter of an enslaved woman named Gracie, of whom Albertus Unwin, her white slaveholder, had children. Old records and a grandson's oral history suggest Unwin left hundreds of acres near present-day Jacksonville, Texas, to Gracie when he died in 1850. Notice how this is all talking about what we're talking about. His family and neighbors did not approve of his relationship with Gracie because she did not live in the house with him, basically his mistress, said Hammond's cousins. The cousins and others are now pushing an online petition Hammond started to try and potentially fulfill a will that was never honored. These were court systems and legal systems that were highly prejudiced against African Americans, either enslaved or recently emancipated, says Sam Houston State University professor and slavery expert Nicholas Crawford, PhD. So let's check out the clip and let's see what it says.
Distant cousins with Texas roots were astounded by a genealogy search, finding out they may be entitled to land apparently left to their enslaved ancestors, land those ancestors never actually received. Jason Miles traveled east to Jacksonville, Texas in Cherokee County to learn more about this story.
From tiny tomatoes on street signs to concrete tomatoes on sidewalks, Jacksonville's tomato capital of the world nickname goes back a long time, as does this city's history. The area's fertile land may have drawn Albertus Arnwine here from Tennessee nearly 2 centuries ago. He died before both the Civil War and Jacksonville's official founding in 1872.
I took the ancestry DNA test and I discovered what happened. It was just unbelievable.
Candace Hammonds claims to be the great-great-great-granddaughter of an enslaved woman named Gracie, with whom Arnwine, her white slaveholder, had children, and to whom old records and this grandson's oral history suggest Arnwine left hundreds of acres.
His family and his neighbors were not, did not approve of his relationship with Gracie because she did live in a house with him as basically his mistress.
Mary Tucker is another descendant now immersed in the story and pushing this online petition Hammond started to try and potentially fulfill a will that was never honored.
These were court systems and legal systems that were heavily prejudiced against African Americans, either enslaved or recently emancipated.
Dr. Nicholas Crawford is an assistant history professor at Sam Houston State University who's writing a book on slavery. He says neither intimate relationships between slaveholders and the enslaved were unheard of, nor the bequeathment of land, adding that some relationships in the antebellum South may have been more nuanced than we tend to think.
And as this case shows, the kind of family lore and oral transmission of the conditions of slavery and agreements between slaveholders and enslaved people can pass down through family trees and still shape the legacies of society today.
Neither Hammonds nor Tucker, who live in Phoenix and Los Angeles respectively, have ever been to Jacksonville or Cherokee County. According to old maps, the land in question lied along the Neches River, but a lot of it may now be underwater thanks to Lake Jacksonville's construction in the 1950s. So far, family members do not have legal representation to help wade through complicated records and right a potential wrong, but it's something they're exploring.
We basically want to share this and get our support from everyone, the world and government officials. We want to turn an injustice into a justice.
In Cherokee County, Texas, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
My dad went EV.
So again, that was a very important, storyline, and that's exactly what we're representing and what we're addressing, the importance of the lineage as we are able to correct these matters. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Cousin Ish. That's really what it's about. Putting some straightening on Grandma and Grandpa's name. Let's start with that. All the horrible stories that we were told when we found out by doing our own due diligence and really paying attention to our families, that they was quite fascinating, way more fascinating than they led us to believe. Way more fascinating. I just want to say I'm very thankful, very grateful for us having the access to the information, because that what little that they were able to deal with, even if they didn't have a telephone, they were still spot on with a lot of things. And that's a skill that, it works for them to the best of their ability at the time. So we have the advantage right now to be able to take this to the next level, especially with ours. And I know it's all being recorded. We know that they're watching clearly, and it's effective. And there's definitely going to be some straightening. Again, I wanted to talk about Tom and the trees and the Portavant family, Brett Favre's family, with them having the lumber company and then moving from Mandeville into the next parish after they sold it to some other people. Hold on one second. Let me get that. And then Robert Livingston, again, going back to Adeliciana, she's related to them. So with her genealogy, you can track the Louisiana Purchase. Again, she marries into Armfield and Franklin, to Isaac Franklin. She's got other wealthy husbands. Ackland actually turned her dollar and her 15 cents into a dollar. He helped take her to the next level. I guess they would have been called a power couple, right? Where at that point, where women had to be meek and docile, he was probably, the Cyrano de Bergerac, right? She was the voice, and he actually acted things out. So, a lot of the power definitely came from her, and the resources, and of course the family members. And these are Confederates. So what happened to the money? And how were they able to reinvent themselves? They did it with the cypress trees. They did it with the lumber. And again, some interesting things about the Poitevin family and Brett Favre's family as well. They are heavily attached to the Choctaw. You will see documentation of the Favres in antiquity being interpreters through the Indian Agency as well. So there is so much to be told about how that structure was, all the way from, West Florida into Quebec. And you can see that by the proclamation lines and a lot of history leading up to prior to the Trail of Tears. So I don't understand how they have these prominent things that happen, and very new, might I add, because the Treaty of Ghent was 1815. So within another 15 years, Andrew Jackson pulls this coup d'etat, right? And does what he does. The one thing I could compliment Andrew Jackson on was stopping the Rothschild, just for a good period of time. And certainly he used it for his presidency, vote no against the bank. Right, but he was against the central banking practices, and I think that kind of incited Rothschilds to, still have their Confederate homies, and of course they had a stake in the Caribbean as well. So going back to how this was all, the La Florida and the West Indies, and that being included, North America, the Eastern Woodlands, and these different nations that are now a part of, the Eastern Woodland Territory, they also indicate the fact that our ports were very important, right? And who had control over the ports and the land. It wasn't just the land, it was also the ports and the access that they had. Even considering that the Mississippi did not go all the way to Minnesota, right? They weren't convinced of that clearly during the 1763 Boundary Acts. They clearly weren't aware of that. And they had to have their exposure through where? Through the West Florida region, right? Before the Louisiana Purchase. So when they did these things, nefarious as it was, there's still the fact that West Florida was its own separate country and republic. And it was not a part of the Louisiana Purchase. And I look forward to the bill to do with CHIEF Warhorse, and we were speaking about that on her live. West Florida is going to be very, very interesting. I look forward to hearing from her. I'm always waiting for her next job. I love how that one, the live was great, but the way that her editor just, gives you that little cliffhanger and stuff like that, I think is interesting. So we're definitely going to go into the West Florida drop. And I think that we should also talk about some of the Caribbean islands that are included within the Muskogee and the other Eastern Woodland tribes, even in Virginia, Carolinas, which for a time does include Georgia as well for British territory, indicates that Bermuda, it says the Virginia, the Carolinas, and the other West Indies. What are the other West Indies? So they are considering these different masses, whether they're by water, detached from the land by a little water or archipelago or whatever, they're still a part of our tribal nations in antiquity. So we know for sure that there's going to be some relatives to Bermuda. We know for sure that there was a reason why the Bermuda Triangle and all of the mystery behind it was, put in between us. Nobody wants to go, Amelia Earhart went down over Bermuda Triangle. Nobody wants to go to the Bermuda Triangle. Nobody really wants to go on vacation. Just the things that the stigma that they put, that's attached to our history and antiquity, especially pre-colonial history, and also a part of these treaties. So it was interesting that certain islands remained under the British protectorate after the United States acquired the British stake here in North America. And these families, they go back even to that time as well, and they were heavily involved in the slave trade, heavily involved in the land theft. That's all inclusive. That article that Cousin Ish was reading from, and he didn't even finish, right? He didn't even finish. I just wanted to make sure that with all of that heat that you was getting, you do what I'm going to ask you to do now. Like the video, share the video, pass the video out there, put it out there. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to Urban Indian Heritage Society. Let me put that banner up. We will be doing some different drops, especially talking about the event that we have coming up. We do have a couple of events coming up as well. The first one is going to be in South Carolina. We're going to give you more details soon. I hope to see y'all there the weekend of April 21st to the 24th, so you can put that on your calendars. Urban Indian Heritage Society. And that'll be 1 year anniversary from the last time, our first event that we did last year in April in New York. So this will be fun. It's going to be a good time. I'm excited. You know how we do when we do what we do. And now we got the right people and the right crew coming to a city, and we right near you. Bars, but let me stop. So yeah, I can't wait to see y'all. The weather's going to be just fine. You know, you know what it is. It's always a good time when we get together. So I'm super excited about that. And of course, you can bring your family from 8 to 80. From 8 to 80. Yes, indeed. You know, we get the spots where all our folks is welcome. We for handicap accessible, everything. Nobody's excluded. Nobody's excluded. It's a wonderful thing. I can't wait to see you guys there. And some of y'all, I already know y'all coming. Y'all come wherever we at, and we love you, and we can't wait to see you. It's been a while. And we've been doing this for a couple of years now, so I know who's going to be there. We have some repeat offenders that just keep pulling up from Grandma Killers to Urban Indian Heritage Society, and we absolutely love y'all. They just roll with us, and we roll with y'all, and you know what it is. I can't wait to see you. Cousin Ish.
Yes, ma'am. What's up, cousin?
Some of those grievances from the people that were actually enslaved. Can you give a little drop on some of the names that people can expect that they may be familiar with?
For sure, for sure. One thing that's really important is that we, you know, like when I'm around the house, I just put on the videos or the audios while I'm around the house. One of them was for 7 hours long, and it was the testimonies of the slaves. Now they're recreated as far as the voices, but they're the actual testimony from the Library of Congress, and the company, you know, reads the testimony that's coming from the slaves, and you're able to hear or get a feeling of what the slaves are actually saying. So a sample of that would be one that's like on YouTube, which was like a part of the 7-hour one that I was listening to. But what you can do is I'll post up what it is as far as what's, and then I will be able to kind of go over what the questions, or, you know, them identifying what they're talking about.
Right.
So
that was some of them from the project they did in 1934 with the Library of Congress.
It is. It's from the 1930s one.
Yes.
And yes, and these audios are coming up from, like, I think from 2021 and 2022, as far as when some of these were being remade. So they're fresh, you know, as far as the recreation of them.
Yes. I've had the pleasure of listening to quite a few, but I will tell you, Zora Neale Hurston interrupts anybody in the Southeast that I've heard her interview that says anything about Indian, even if they are witnessing other Indians being enslaved with them. Zora Neale Hurston shuts them down. I don't know what that woman had, but if you listen to some of those narratives, yeah, she ain't right with it.
Absolutely. So one of the samples is like this one, that's Slave Narratives, a folk history of slavery in the United States, from the interviews. And again, you're able to pull it up, and I just like put it on while I'm around the house, you know. Sometimes it's better than some of the things that go on in some of those online forums. And this is a sample of kind of what it is. Just one moment here. And what I'm listening for are for those slaves that are saying that they have, you know, the Indian lineage, and then we piece them together. I just wanted to show you the method of how it's being done. Just one moment.
Interviewer: did the owner collect the pay for the labor, Uncle Jackson? No, ma'am, that they didn't.
So we're talking about really early in
And
this
raise
one.
the chillins. You know they lays a heap of stress on education these days, but education is one thing and fireside training is another. We had fireside training. We went to church regular. All our people marched behind our owners and sat up in the galleys of the white folks' church. Now them that was to St. James Church behind the white folks didn't dare look at nobody else. 'Twa'n't allowed. They were taught they were better than anybody else. That was called the silk stocking church. Nobody else was fitting to look at. My mother was the laundress for the white folks. In those days, ladies wore clothes, and plenty of 'em. My daddy was one of the part Indian folks. My mammy was brought here from Washington City, and when her owner went back home, he sold her to my folks.
So when you listen to those examples, then I mark down, okay, this is the person that's being interviewed. And then you say, okay, this person, you know, is talking about how they're part Indian. You also have the other people in there that talk about their family that are from specific tribes. So they'll say mama was, you know, a full-blooded Lumbee, or, you know, daddy was, you know, Cherokee and stuff like that. And you start to see over and over and over again, just from the examples of what I was able to provide, was over 250 examples of different people, not just one person saying the same thing. These are different people that are saying that their Indian ancestors were enslaved, and then this is how this person became a slave. So these people, as we talk about these companies, let's talk about what these companies are just in a little bit of detail to show you the methodology of what they were doing when they were enslaving these people, because we were naming some of those names. Let's just take a look at like two of the companies. One of those companies that we said we were going to talk about was that James H. Birch and Company. It says that James H. Birch and Company was one of the most prominent firms in the intra-American slave trade based out of New Orleans. They specialized in the trafficking of the American Indians, particularly those of the Choctaw and the Chickasaw tribes in the southeastern United States. Birch and his partners operated a system that involved sending agents into the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations, capture and enslave individuals who could then be sold to plantations in the American South. These agents were known as Indian hunters. They were used in a variety of methods to capture enslaved individuals, including deception, force, and outright violence. Once captured, the enslaved people were taken to New Orleans, where they were sold at auction to the highest bidder. A trade in American Indians was a brutal and exploitive system, and the actions of Birch and his associates were no exception. According to historian Alan Gallay, he's the one who wrote the other slavery book that we were talking about. According to Alan Gallay, the company was responsible for the trafficking of over 1,000 American Indian slaves per year, making it one of the largest slave trading firms in the United States. The company's profits were enormous, with an estimated annual revenue of over $1 million from the sale of enslaved individuals. Birch and his partners were not just motivated by financial gain, they also believed in the ideology of white supremacy and saw their actions as a way to maintain the dominance of the white race. As Birch himself wrote in an 1855 letter to a fellow slave trader, quote, "The race is doomed to pass away, but it is important that the effects of the passing away should be as light as possible, and the race be made to contribute as much as possible to the benefit of the world while it lasts," unquote. So the legacy of James H. Birch and the intra-America slave trade more broadly continues to impact the communities within the United States. Another company, what we talked about was that Phoenix and Talbot, which operated in the late 18th and early 19th century, was one of the most egregious examples of human exploitations in American history. Phoenix and Talbot Indian slave trading began in the late 1700s during the period of intense conflict between the white settlers and the indigenous populations in the southeastern United States. As white settlers encroached on Indian lands, they often clashed with Indian inhabitants, leading to violence and displacement. As the demand for enslaved labor grew in the West and Southwest, white traders began to focus on acquiring indigenous slaves from the Southeast. One of the most prominent traders in this region was named William Panton, who established a trading post in Pensacola, Florida. In the process, Panton and his partners began to acquire indigenous slaves either through direct kidnapping or purchasing them from other traders. They soon realized that there was a large market for these slaves in the West and the Southwest, where white settlers were eager to acquire cheap labor for their plantations and ranches. Panton and his partners began to expand their trading network, establishing connections within traders of Louisiana and Texas and other parts of the West and Southwest. So I just wanted to show that there was a methodology and an entire system of place. And those are just two of the companies of them enslaving the indigenous populations in the 1800s. This is where those slaves were coming from, and they were making a tremendous profit in doing so.
Yes, they was. So they absolutely have kidnapped Indians. And again, these are the things that are lesser talked about. And what are they calling these descendants of the people that were enslaved? Especially if they went to Oklahoma, they're calling them Africans now. They left the Indians and ended up being called something else. So their classifications constantly changed over and over and over again.
Yeah, and the sad part is that these people are calling themselves Africans. They're calling themselves Africans and arguing for the title to be known as descendants of Africans.
That's right. Again, we bring in the receipts. This is the facts. Don't get mad at us. History is what it is. It was always here. They just thought it was important that we looked at other things that were less important. But here we are. And grandma and grandpa is the business. This is the conscious community. If you are not conscious of what your family was doing during these questionable years, it's going to take you a long time to catch up. You definitely can't fake the funk like you qualified if you don't know what your folks were doing or how they were affected. I did hear that they having a tornado out there in Oklahoma. Mr. Waldo and all our loved ones out there, we pray for your safety. 115-mile-an-hour winds ain't no joke. So definitely pray that it passes quickly and that, nobody's hurt.
Because you're asking for some names, you were saying, right? You're asking for some names?
Yes.
We can go over that too. Absolutely. What we'll do is I'll show the audience what goes on in the forum as far as the information, and we can kind of go from there. No problem. Here. And anybody's welcome to join the forum and get access to the information. In doing so, this is some of the information what we have back here on the back side that the public doesn't get access to. Okay. So in looking at that, we have the post, but that you'll see on front, but it's just a little more of the actual details of what's going on. And the names and the testimonies of what we have here, we'll just start with the Federal Writers Projects. I give you the link to the Library of Congress for anybody to log on to, the .gov, and you'll be able to see for yourselves. An interview, formerly enslaved George Anderson describes his mother as a full-blooded Cherokee and his mother and his father as a mulatto. And I'm giving you the specific names of each one of these slaves and the testimony, the direct quote that's coming from them. So you can go and you can go with these ones that are just dealing with Indians, or I'll also give you the ones that are dealing with specifically. Example, Henry Berry describes his grandmother as a Lumbee Indian woman who was enslaved. You can pick another name. We can go with Robert Miller, who says that his mother was a Lumbee woman who was enslaved. These are direct testimonies that the government already has in their files. We're looking at the numbers, the names, the names, the names, the names. Look at those names. This is now, I not only give you the Lumbee, I go into the Choctaws. In an interview, we talk about Harriet Oxendine. She mentions that her grandmother was part Choctaw Indian. We're dealing with all of these ones that are dealing with the whole Choctaws. All of these different tribes that these people are being robbed and stolen of, all of these identities. Then I go with the Cherokees. An interview with Mary Strother, who mentions that her grandmother was a full-blooded Indian woman. Are you kidding me? These people were they were kidnapping and stealing indigenous people that were being mislabeled as Africans. And then when we're giving their direct testimony to the government, you can see for yourselves all of these names of these people self-identifying themselves as American Indians. You would really be amazed at the volume of information. So please feel free to, get the information. I'm positive. I mean, when you talk about the Lumbees, all of those Locklears that are listed in these testimonies here, these are Locklears that are not only Lumbees, but Locklears that are connected to the Choctaw nations that are in here.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
You would be
yes.
amazed. You would be absolutely amazed at what these people are saying for themselves.
And quite interesting, again, there's also Natchez, right, that were kidnapped and taken into the Southeast as well. So as they're bringing people from North and South Carolina and Georgia into Louisiana, what do you think they're doing with the Louisiana people? They're replacing them and bringing them into North Carolina, Virginia. They can't take one thing and don't have something to replace it. And that's exactly what they were doing. Look inside some of these places. I know I did a bill before. Maybe we could include that. Well, it'll be included when we do the genealogy class, the defunct counties. And we're going to go over some of the defunct counties and different towns and parishes that don't exist anymore. So this is why you sometimes are not able to find the records. It's not because they're not there, but they don't have St. George's Parish anymore. Doesn't speak for, that portion of the eastern shore of Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, right? And Bermuda, because that's what it would include. So certain places, the records are going to be housed under something different. Then I think we also need to break down how the Holy Roman Empire is a political party. I don't think people understand that the Holy Roman Empire is a political party like the Republicans and Democrats and the Jacobites. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And a lot of those descendants, and going back to James Polk, this is why they called him the general and the bishop. James Polk also tied into the slave trade, especially via North Carolina. You got some Indian Polks, you got some white Polks, and you got some swarthy European ones, right? That is the truth. Some of them have been pretending to be Indians, and now this is where we have to be open about what it is that we're seeing in our family trees, right? And they're connected to these other families that are participants, and they work for these different companies that Cousin Ish and Jmar were speaking about.
Oh, wait until you get the factor where the Mayans start coming in. Oh man, wait until you see that part of the story, man. The Mayans that were being shipped to Southeastern. Yeah. We got a lot.
Yeah, so they and not only that, but they're also they were also creating problems and sending a lot of Indians abroad. The most problematic ones they sent abroad. And the rest that they couldn't get rid of, the descendants of the people that I'm sure that they sent to Haiti from Natchez, ended up being the descendants that actually went back home post-antebellum and met their demise at the Devil's Punch Bowl. They have forts and stuff named after them that have nothing to do with their families, only everything to do with the people that they stole from. And they've been naming these things after themselves, the daughters of the Confederacy, the sons of the Confederacy, and they put all these different little nuisances up, because they're nuisances, right? The Boy Scouts was stealing our skills and giving them to little Skip and Chad, right? That's exactly what that was. And then they utilized the Boy Scouts to teach new immigrant children about nature and stuff like that, provided they can afford the experience. And then, of course, tied into the Catholic Church and the things that they do, the nefarious things that they do are known to do. The same things occurred in the Boy Scouts. So some of these things that are still exposed, especially in the Confederate States, they do need to be removed. Especially for the instance of only in the instance of the constant reminder of the Indian not realizing where he's at, right? And getting to the bottom of it and how they've been able to insert themselves politically. And you have families that of course, they do the nepotism, especially in Georgia. And it's time for people to make sure they understand who's aware, who's around them, right? Because they're direct descendants of these same people that were doing these nefarious things 200 years ago. They're the same folks doing it in a different fashion. And they're just going to make sure that they get these bodies filled up in Angola and these other places in particular, because they get to capitalize off of it. They're investing in our demise. And it goes back for a very long time, almost 200 years worth from these folks. And these are just the families that are attached to, again, Tom Ackland and crew. I don't even know what you call them because, again, all of the things that we're able to extract that directly tie into the thorn in the fabric of America, specifically when it comes to the Indian slaves and how it was so greatly undermined and substituted for African slavery and 12 million people that never came here.
There is something, cousin, I wanted to make sure I read into the record, if that's okay.
Yes.
It was Skip Gates, you know, that little smirk on his face when he was talking with Don Cheadle and dealing with the Chickasaw history. Let's make sure. Let's make sure we read into the record the Chickasaw Trading Company. I know I mentioned them earlier, but I don't want to leave these bastards off the hook. The Chickasaw Trading Company, the Inter-American Slave Trade. The Chickasaw Trading Company was founded as a means of economic development for the Chickasaw people, who had already experienced significant displacement and loss of land due to white settlement in the Southeast. The company initially focused on the fur trade, but by the 1820s, it had begun to expand into the slave trade. I want to make this clear. The Chickasaw Trading Company expanded into the slave trade. The Chickasaw Trading Company primarily trafficked in African people whom they purchased from traders in the Southeast and sold the buyers in the states like Mississippi and Louisiana. Now, mind you, we need to find out how were they specializing in the African slave trade in the 1820s when the African slave trade was banned after 1808. So anyways, the company also owned and operated several plantations. Again, this company owned and operated several plantations in Mississippi, where they used enslaved labor to produce cotton and other crops for sale. In addition to their involvement in the slave trade, the Chickasaw Trading Company was also involved in the removal of American Indian tribes from their ancestral homelands. The Chickasaw people were among the 5 quote-unquote civilized tribes, which also included the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and Seminole nations. These tribes were forcibly removed from their lands in the Southeast and relocated to Oklahoma. So I just want to make it clear that the Chickasaw Trading Company is guilty of being complicit of enslaving the people from their own ancestral homelands. We're not letting nobody off the hook. And I'm going to give you all the footnotes right there on the backside of everything that I'm saying. I yield the floor.
Ooh, we thank you, cousin Ish. Fire, fire, fire in the hole. We can't let them off the hook at all. That Chickasaw deerskin trade was madness with all the Indians that they were kidnapping Indians then in the 1700s as well. So if that was their thing, by the time you're connecting the dots with that, they were doing that already in the 1700s.
And might I add to that, you know, there's many accounts where it says that how an African was way more expensive than an Indian slave. Some accounts say that you could buy 3 to 4 Indian slaves for the price of one African. So it would only make sense in a business that you get the labor from the land that you're actually trying to conquer, rather than investing extra money on a ship to then send to Africa to pick up your labor and then bring them back. It just complicates the whole story. That's why critically and analyzing everything and put it in the proper context will highlight the truth.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, y'all. We got a lot of fire in the chat, y'all. Got a lot of fire.
Hey, Phoenix, I kind of want to tap on something when it comes to the prison era.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm gonna screen share. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, actually, let me move the post in the fire. Let me take that down. There you go.
Yeah, this is a quick little history of Louisiana and the state penitentiary. So before 1835, state inmates lived in a jail in New Orleans. The first Louisiana State Penitentiary was located at the intersection of 6th Street and Laurel Street in Baton Rouge. It was a model on a prison in Westfield, Connecticut. In 1844, the state leased the prison and its prisoners to McHatton Pratt and Company, a private company. This was up until the Union then occupied Louisiana. So the beginning of the private prison system is with this private company called McHatton Pratt and Company. So that would be the first start of one of the first leases coming from the state to run these jails, specifically in Baton Rouge. Connecting that. So getting into this McHatton and Pratt Company. In 1844, the state privatized the penitentiary, leading it to a company called McHatton, Pratt and Ward. The company was responsible for operations of the prison, including feeding, clothing inmates. It could use inmate labor towards its own ends. The company put inmates to work from dawn till dusk in the penitentiary's textile factory. The men laid aside all the objects of reformation, and one prisoner wrote and reinstated the most cruel tyranny that eke out the dollars and cents of human misery. Men who couldn't keep up with the work were beaten and whipped, sometimes to death. So giving you a quick brief introduction to the start of what we know today as our private prison system, which was going on as early as 1844 with this McHatton Pratt Ward and Company. Now, continuing from there, now after the Civil War, that lease was given up. And we run into our next person, Samuel L. James, and the next company, James Bruckner and Company. So the interesting thing about this is Samuel James, he was a Confederate fighter, and he was given this in 1869, which is quite odd that they give this lease to this Confederate fighter, you know. And in 1869, he gets a 5-year lease. The following year, by 1870, they extend that to a 21-year lease. So just 1 year later, they extend the 5-year lease to a 21-year lease. Just off the bat. Didn't even complete the first 5 years. They just gave him in 1870 21-year lease, which you'll see here. 1870, the lease was extended from 5 to 21 years. During the time, James reportedly maintained the most cynical, profit-oriented prison regime in Louisiana's history. Right? He goes down as one of the most brutal when it comes to this new private prison system. From there, I would like to connect it to another article. And this is Slavery in Baton Rouge, Slavery and Convict Slavery, Examining the Connections in Baton Rouge. And this is coming from online by Bria Barnes. And it goes into, of course, the beginning of what I was explaining, the Manhattan and Company. Manhattan and Company is not a name many Baton Rouge natives are accustomed to, as well as many scholars themselves have not had the pleasure of knowing the name. So, right off the bat, most people don't even know who was the first person to get the lease to start what we know today as our private prison system. Continuing, this company's history is embedded deep in Baton Rouge history with the start of the American prison system as we know it. James A. McHatton and his contribution started a new system of slavery, one that has progressed to become a multi-million-dollar industry that the American government has exploited. And it all started in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with the convict leasing system. It all began in 1832. Louisiana state legislature decided to pass an act to create the first Louisiana state penitentiary. This one was not in Angola, but Baton Rouge at the intersection of 6th and Laurel. All right. So I'm going to jump back to the Angola because, as we know, when Miss Alicia and William get into financial troubles, that will be her third husband, they end up selling the property to a partnership of Louise Trager and Samuel L. James. Eventually, Samuel L. James, who was the engineer, and under the James and Bruckner Company, started the next private prison system. And this lease gave him the authority to manage the main prison in Baton Rouge, as well as to lease out convicts, right? So here's your convict leasing, right? Still some of that brutal prison system, as we can see today. Connecting that, right? Jumping from this private prison system, because it goes on to further detail until eventually Samuel L. James passes away. His son picks it up in the 1880s and assumes control. And eventually it doesn't get passed on to the state until 1901. But jumping back into more antebellum periods, I would like to share this right here, this document. Oh, let me go to the front for you. This document I got from just searching from JSTOR.
Gotta love JSTOR.
Oh yeah, let me zoom in up for y'all. How's that? Can y'all see that?
Those are some good sources, brother Jmar. Good job, brother.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. This source is called The Negro Dependent Child in Louisiana, 1880 to 1935. So, before the Civil War, most of the slaves had no problem of dependency, for the master had the entire responsibility for all his slave children. Conversely, free black dependent children were placed in parish jails, from which they were apprenticed to work on nearby farms. Since Louisiana provided no institutional care for them, during and after the war, some private institutions were open for the orphans, but the delinquent or handicapped child languished in the parish jails throughout the state. Only in the past 50 years has the state provided the same type of institutional care for blacks and whites, but this care has usually been separated and unequal. So this right here is a source that I wanted to bring up because it connects the next source. It goes into a lot of ill treatment of a lot of these Negro, quote unquote, dependent children in Louisiana. And I encourage everyone to look this up. Definitely check it out. Check this source out, read through it. But I'm going to go into my next source to connect this. Let me back out of here. Still staying at JSTOR. I came across this special report. Special report. Center it up for you guys. Secret horrors, enslaved women and children in Louisiana State Penitentiary, 1833 to 1862. So this special report explores one of the darkened dens of slavery by examining the reasons for women's incarceration, the mothers of the children who were sold, and the men who purchased them. Records indicate that penitentiary officials who owned plantations purchased several of the auctioned children. The investigation of what happened to the prison children relies on evidence from newspapers, official reports from the penitentiary inspectors, biennial reports from the penitentiary lessees, and the official records of the War of the Rebellion and the federal census of 1850 and 1860. Just breaking down some of where these sources come from. So let me go back. The introduction of the state penitentiaries across the southern United States during the early 19th century offered antebellum state governments an authority to benefit financially from the investment. Operated with inmate labor were initially constructed to relieve the overcrowded county jails, contribute to the rehabilitations of inmates, and to make the penitentiaries self-sustaining enterprises. Studies of the trans-Mississippi state prisons focus on their origins and notorious corruptions and attempts at reform, but devote little attention to women and children inmates. Thus, very little is known about women and children incarcerated in antebellum penitentiaries. Louisiana was the only slave state that passed legislation that mandated the auction of children born to enslaved women. And as you see this picture right here, I will jump ahead because I would like to actually read.
They had a law in the early 1700s that said that the enslaved children that were too young would have to be enslaved with their mother. I don't know. I know you're in the 1800s, but I know.
Yes, correct. It does mention in here that actually that was a law, but as we know, these enslavers didn't really necessarily follow the law. So it did mention that a lot of these children and mothers were separated. I would just like to read it. This is the act passed. State of Louisiana. By virtue of an act of the legislature of the state of Louisiana approved the 11th day of December, A.D. 1848, entitled an act to provide for the disposal of such slaves as may be born in the Louisiana Penitentiary, the issue of slave convicts for life. I will offer a public sale in front of the courthouse door of said parish in the city of Baton Rouge on said day, Saturday, such and such. But this was actually a newspaper advertising stating the act that was passed and them basically saying how business was open from there. Backing up a little bit, because I just wanted to show that newspaper clipping. These are the steps, right? The Baton Rouge Parish Courthouse, front entrance, 1857. That some of these children and enslaved women would actually be auctioned from. So, continuing down here, corruption and greed of the penal system controlled by politicians who emphasize the pursuit of profit as the primary motive from 1835 to 1968. Now, this is where I got that source before. It says the Negro dependent child in Louisiana, 1800 to 1935. That's what I read right before this. Just building up to these enslavement of these women and children. And this, it goes on, it gives you a couple of examples of some of these women sold, and it even gives a breakdown list. So I'll start here, rounding up right before that act was passed. The Louisiana State Penitentiary was the first penal institution established in the Trans-Mississippi region. Louisiana followed the example of Mississippi and Georgia by also constructing a large textile factory operated by inmate labor, right? So there you got those inmate labors. By 1840, the penitentiary held 174 inmates, including 7 enslaved African American women and children. See the tables provided. I will show those later. Louisiana slave code compensated owners for the monetary loss when enslaved workers received life sentences, but varied depending on the market. Going down to the passing of this bill. By 1848, the prison's population consisted of 172 inmates, including 13 enslaved women and their 6 children. On February 24th, 1848, John Henry Pryor Womack of Louisiana House of Representatives offered a bill to provide for the disposal of children born in the penitentiary to enslaved female inmates. The bill stalled in the committee meeting, but passed during the state legislature extra sessions in December 1848. The legislation was titled An Act for Providing for the Disposal of Such Slaves as Are or May Be Born in the Penitentiary, the Issue of Convicts. And the first section stated that the issue of any slave confined in the penitentiary for life, born during said confinement, shall inure to the said state and become property thereof. The second section noted that it shall be the duty of the clerk of the state penitentiary to keep a register of births in the penitentiary. No such register had been located among official records of the penitentiary. The second section of the act made it clear when a child was born in said penitentiary and who said mother is a slave confined for life shall attain to the age of 10, and said clerk shall notify in writing the sheriff of Baton Rouge Parish the name of said child and of having attained to the said age. The auction of these children was to be advertised in the state newspaper on the courthouse door for 30 days. Pursuant to the advertisement, sell a slave child for cash and pay the proceeds of said slave to the state treasurer to become part of the free school fund of said state. The Speaker of Louisiana House of Representatives, President of Louisiana Senate, and Governor Isaac John signed the act into law on December 11th, 1848. Now, this was a breakdown of some of the inmates in the Louisiana penitentiary housed during the years. And they had another one where this is a list of the female slave inmates, mothers, and children. So it quite also identified that a lot of these women were either impregnated by the officials, the guards,
yeah.
or other inmates. So yeah, I was just highlighting some of this brutal history. Not only do you have, let me stop this screen share real quick. Not only do you have this privatization of the prison, you have the trafficking of individuals, whether they be free or enslaved. And you also have the brutal treatment of prisoners that include men and most egregiously, women and children.
That's right, making it generational, just in that penal institution alone. That's right.
Mm-hmm. I want to thank you for that, Brother Jmar. That was deep.
I do as well. Good job.
Yes, that was deep. When y'all gonna be available? They already texting me talking about when y'all gonna do part 4. That's definitely up to Cousin Ish and Jmar. You know we could do this all day. We got good chemistry too. It goes through real smooth. I definitely appreciate you guys. Always welcome.
Yeah, absolutely, Cousin Phoenix. You let me know, the time, and I'll always make sure I avail myself to you and Brother Jmar. I mean, some outstanding jobs even during the week of his longhouse. So make sure that y'all are able to join the longhouse in the Clubhouse app.
Indeed. Yes,
some
indeed.
good information going on there. But yeah, Sundays kind of seem like it kind of works best for everybody. So I bet y'all just let me know anytime I'm here.
All right, so I guess we'll be back next Sunday then, y'all. That's what we gonna do. Can't wait to see you all. I'm so glad y'all pulled up on us. Of course, we all gonna be waiting on the edge of our seat for some of these events that are gonna be unfolding. More people revealing themselves. More of this federal recognition stuff kind of falling apart at the seams. Us getting some answers and getting closer to having a conversation about some act right for the misclassified American Indians. If you haven't done so already, sign the petition. I know for sure my cousins put that petition down there in that chat somewhere. If you like, I can put it up again. I'll put it up as a banner. If you haven't done so already, sign the petition. Sign the petition. It's for the greater good of Indian country and the misclassified Indians. I forget what the number is. I know we are over 7,000. We're looking to get to 10,000. I'm pretty sure as the time goes up towards the event and we're out and about and, we're being able to mix and mingle outside of social media, I'm pretty sure that we're going to get those numbers up. And we'll definitely be at 10,000 for sure by the summertime. There's no special time frame. That petition going to keep rolling until we get everybody's attention that we need. In the interim, we're going to keep contacting Congress, waiting for our turn to hold the microphone. We're going to keep doing the same thing. That's where the real work is. And we're going to keep supporting each other in our endeavors of keeping our families strong and our affairs even stronger, right? We're trying to fortify the bill, make sure these bozos don't come in and throw all this hard work away. We right there getting ready to cross the finish line. Please don't stick your feet out. Please don't stick your feet out. If you guys got any closing words before we leave our beautiful audience, I love how they come and pull up and chill with us. It's so dope. Appreciate y'all.
I definitely want to thank everybody who participates in assisting with Urban Indian Heritage Society. Your works are just, it's invaluable. Just the spirit that you're coming in, the works of what you're doing on the ground, and just helping, promote and get the message out. Those who support the different endeavors of what we're doing, we appreciate you and thank you so much for being able to do so. Also, you spending the time to spend quality time with us. There's a lot of things that you can indeed be doing on Sunday, but by you taking the time, I hope that we're able to respect your time and give you good quality information. We're working on some really powerful projects that we'll be presenting to the public that we're doing and working on throughout the week to continue not only giving you information on Sunday, but just, in the meantime. So as we keep on attaining our goals, we want to thank each and every one of you for taking time to spend time with us. And I want to thank you again, Cousin Phoenix, for availing your platform to us. Also, as we build the Urban Indian Heritage Society sites up, we'll make sure that we're giving you 100% also. Thank you for what you do for us. And we're here and we got your back.
Definitely. Thanks for everyone showing up, tuning in to our live as we try to disseminate some of this information and dig a little deeper. Definitely, I would like to thank you, Phoenix and Brother Ish. You guys are definitely heavy hitters bringing the information. I'm just trying to keep up. So, I would definitely be honored to, we could do another drop. I mean, it's so much information just coming off of that live from Chief Warhorse that we can break this down so many different ways. So definitely I'm up for it. And until next time.
Yes, indeed. Okay, y'all heard it here first. So we'll see y'all again next Sunday. Same Indian time, same Indian channel. Y'all take care of yourselves and each other. And if not now, then when? And if it ain't us, then who? Let's get it in. Get used to winning. Love y'all. Thank y'all so much for pulling up. Shout out to you, Juanas, Fonding Feathers, everybody at Urban Indian Heritage Society, and also the beautiful ones at American Indian Political Party. You're going to hear a lot more from them soon. And I can't wait for that. May the creators keep you all healthy and well. Maintain your mental space. Keep it clean, the hygiene. Keep it right. Chupisa la chique.
Udo.